this evening. Let us begin our evening of remembrance with open hearts and minds. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you for your words, Dr. Crosby. I would now like to invite Father Joe Farias, the chaplain of St. Elizabeth University, to grace us with an opening prayer.
Let us pray in this holy and great week of for Eastern Christians. O God of the living and embracer of those who have died, our hearts break with devastation. It is your heart that bleeds over human destruction, the shedding of blood. Recollection of humans may become dimmed, but you never forget. May our memory never be sealed, lest our forgetfulness moves us to complacence of such violence and the stories of the martyrs be unheard. Along with those whose lives were destroyed, we also remember those who defied orders, who rebelled against power. We mark a bit more than a century of devastation since Armenia, Holocaust, Rwanda, Bosnia, Cambodia, Darfur, Kurds in Iraq, Burma, and even more, east, north, south, and west. We lament the continuation of cruel hatred for others because of race, religion, physical, and gender differences. Hate is never victory. Peace only reigns when it is global. May that peace begin in our hearts and extend from our hands to the ends of the earth. Amen.
Thank you, Father Joe. Dr. Deborah Garish is an author and longtime committed educator about the Armenian Genocide. Dr. Garish has taught various courses on the topic, informing a wide array of students about the reality of the tragedy of 1915. She will now share two of her personal poems with us this evening. I'd like to bring up Dr. Deborah Garish.
Thank you, and good evening. Welcome everyone to our commemoration of the 109th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. I want to thank everyone who was involved in helping to implement this program as part of the Holocaust and Genocide Center of St. Elizabeth University, and especially give thanks and gratitude for our director, Dr. Richard Quinlan, for his perseverance, dedication, and devotion in making this remarkable program of remembrance possible, and in adding his light to the light, reminding us that we are all witnesses. We are witnesses to the witnesses, those that we will be hearing today. And so I am second generation Armenian born in this country. My maternal grandparents escaped the genocide by fleeing Diyarbakir, Turkey, and finding refuge in France, and then came to America through Ellis Island in early 1915. When my grandparents fled from Turkey and escaped to Paris, and then found refuge here, as I mentioned, they left all their loved ones behind, their aunts, uncles, parents, brothers, sisters, never to see them again, and losing all contact. My paternal grandparents arrived here in the early 1900s from the same city my maternal grandparents fled, Diyarbakir, Turkey, and they settled in New York City. However, they left the East Coast and bought a farm in California. My paternal grandfather died in the pandemic of 1918 in San Francisco. I hope you glean more knowledge tonight through the music, the poetry, and film presentation, realizing, as in the words of Dmitri Shostakovich, art destroys silence. I would like to begin by reading from Ararat magazine, which is no longer in hard copy, but is online, A few of the 47 quotations drawn from 107 non-Armenians on what they said about Armenians. I will just read a few. Elizabeth Bauer, Australian Armenologist, at the dawn of history, Armenia was one of the cradles of civilizations. Lord Byron, the poet, said Armenian is the language to speak with God. Francois Mitterrand said, Armenian people do not belong to the past, but they are part of the present and will be here in the future. Evelyn Wong, English novelist, said the two most accomplished men I met during the 6 months abroad were Armenians. And Hendrik Smith, American foreign correspondent and author, born in 1933, stated, Armenians maintained a strong sense of national identity even in the darkest years of communist rule. Israel Zangwill lastly said, I take the crown of thorns from Israel's head and I place it upon Armenia's. My genre of choice and expression is poetry. The Austrian poet Rilke said about poetry, for poems are not, as people think, simply emotions, they are experiences. So think of these poems as experiences and how you have become witnesses through these snapshots, and by remembering that everyone has a story to tell. We are stewards of our stories. We preserve them and pass them down from generation to generation. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are. They are part of our healing, part of our survival, and need to be told, lest we forget who we are. So I'll be reading two poems from the language of Paisley. The first poem, Grandfather's Funeral, offers a glimpse into my maternal grandparents' personal story and how they survived religious and physical persecution by the Ottoman Turks at the sacrifice of separation from their family. And the second poem, Paisley, tells the story of visiting my grandparents in their apartment in Paterson in the 1950s, illustrating survival and how life goes on. My grandfather spoke Armenian and Aramaic and would ask my mother to tell me as a child to wear the gold paisley dress with the velvet sash when I would go to visit. Grandfather's Funeral. I remember I just turned 15. At the hospital, your enlarged stomach, thick white hair, radiant face. The sterile room, its lack of movement, hushed but for the foreign voice of the humming oxygen tank, shaking our sky. Massive heart attack, age 83. Thinking of my grandfather's Bible, the largest I ever saw, resting on his dresser in the bedroom. As we all file into the funeral home, tiny ants dragging regrets behind. Thinking of his stories, how he ended here, how he began here in Paterson, 1914, how he and his bride fled Diyarbakir, Turkey, that unforgettable July, less than 1 year before the Armenian Genocide. Sold all her jewelry, her heavy gold heart, his etched timepiece and chain, her rings. A small offering for passage for two on the Oceanic's last voyage. They were only teenagers as they left their family, fled in a horse and buggy that steamy summer afternoon. The screeching parakeets, the undulating fields of watermelons, how grandfather's weeping mother couldn't persuade the young couple to stay. Sent her sons to stop them, his brothers Joseph and Abraham tugging at my grandfather's coattails, screaming, "Don't go, please don't go," chasing them down the dusky road as they fled to America. and the second one, Paisley, Paterson, New Jersey, 1955. My grandfather from Diabecker knows little English. He always asks me to wear the gold Paisley dress with the purple velvet sash when I come to visit. On Grove Street, we sit on the damask sofa, Aunts Frida, Anahid, Mother, and I, dipping braids of choreg in our tea. Grandfather and the men drink arak, six crystal glasses placed on a silver tray, mountains of almonds, apricots, Turkish figs. I can still smell his pungent cigars, see his rosy face, hear the deep-bellied laugh. Grandmother scurries in her closet of a kitchen, preparing dolma, rolled grape leaves. In the parlor, Persian rugs covering the floor. We play backgammon in his castle above the grocery store, snapping pistachios between our teeth as in the old country. And I grow drowsy with their Armenian chatter. The phonograph hums exotic music and Pretty Bird, grandmother's tiny blue parakeet brought from the other side, chirps along from its corner in the kitchen. And so in closing, I would like to end with these words by William Saroyan, emphasizing the remarkable resilience of the Armenian people. Go ahead, destroy Armenia. See if you can do it. Send them into the desert without bread or water, burn their homes and churches, then see if they will not laugh, sing, and pray again. For when two of them meet anywhere in the world, see if they will not create a new Armenia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your stirring work, Dr. Garish. Truly appreciated. Such a wonderful tone for the evening. It is now an honor for me to welcome our keynote speaker tonight. Vic Gerami is a documentary filmmaker, author, lecturer, journalist, publisher, and radio host. If you could let me borrow any of those talents, that would be great, Vic. I promise I'll give them back. Tonight, he will share clips from his film Motherland, as well as discuss both the history of the Armenian Genocide, as well as the contemporary events in the region that are so woefully underreported. St. Elizabeth University is thrilled to bring to the stage and host tonight Vic Gerami.
Good evening. I think we're going to start by Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, we're going to start by watching the trailer to my most recent documentary, Motherland.
Before the invasion of Ukraine, there was Artsakh. With the blessing of Russia's President Putin, nations of Azerbaijan and Turkey invaded the independent Republic of Artsakh, also known by its Soviet name Nagorno-Karabakh, in 2020, and massacred more than 5,000 indigenous Armenians from their ancestral homeland of Volhynia, while world leaders watched in deafening silence.
I've been speaking out about the current situation in Armenia and Artsakh.
Removing Armenian civilians from their ancestral homeland in Artsakh.
Turkey's role in
importing terrorists between Russia and Turkey and Azerbaijan. This is potentially an existential threat.
Maybe we need to be talking about sanctions on Turkey.
In 2021, President Biden became the first US president to officially recognize the Armenian Genocide of 1915 by the Ottoman Turks. But history repeats itself as the ethnic cleansing of Armenian people continues. This was Putin's successful dry run before his invasion of Ukraine, but I bet that you've never heard about it. So I went to my motherland to investigate the attack and shed light on this precursor to the invasion of Ukraine. Where will they invade next?
So, as you can see, the Armenian Genocide has not ended. It's ongoing. It just paused. It started in the late 19th century, climaxed in 1915, and then took a different form. And then, of course, 4 years ago, we saw another chapter of it. It can be examined as its own freestanding genocide, or it can be examined as part of the greater Armenian genocide. So I, just like with my film, I don't believe in just dumping negative information without any kind of solution, or at least some positive development. So I hope that by the end of this presentation, you're going to hear some of that too. I'm also looking down here. I'm timing myself, so bear with me. So first I want to say it's really good to be here in so many ways. I'd never been to New Jersey. New York next door, yes, but not New Jersey. And just driving through, what a beautiful city, at least Morristown, what I saw. I'm very grateful and thankful to Professor Richard Quinlan and also Dr. Edna Antonian, I don't see either one of them, for inviting me here, for Dr. Quinlan inviting me here to speak, and also Dr. Antonian for championing it and really and for having been very supportive. So I'm grateful for that, and all of you for being here, and everyone that's doing all the tech stuff. Thank you so much. So a little bit about me. I call myself an activist journalist. And I have a radio show. It's news and politics. I interview members of Congress and make documentary films. I say activist because, well, first of all, we Armenians don't really have a choice not to be activists. I mean, we're sort of born to that role. And I also don't believe in being neutral. There's no such thing. I don't believe that journalists are ever 100% neutral. They pretend it, but it's just, it's not possible. And of course, you know, this resurgence of genocide has activated most of us. So that's sort of the basics of what I do. Growing up sort of a shy, nerdy kid, I was drawn to books, and I read a lot of books about the Armenian Genocide. I read Zartung, which is a very massive, heavy book, 10 years old. I reread it a few years ago when it was translated. And you know, so it's sort of been a part of me. But then just learning everything about the genocide, as a lot of you probably thought, how is this possible? In 1915, there were phones, there were cars. How did they pull this off? And then it happened again when we have, X or Twitter, and we have social media, and we have 24/7 news, and it was done again. And it's not just that. It's happening all over the place. I do want to, talking about being neutral, I want to read a couple of quotes. One of them is from one of my favorite, I would say, spiritual leaders who passed, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. Desmond Tutu, who said, if you are neutral in the situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. So those who fancy themselves as neutral, they're not. They're just allowing things to happen to the weaker party. And of course, the great Elie Wiesel said, we must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere. When human lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. Wherever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. That's so poignant, just it applies to so much of what's happening around the world and the politics of world powers taking sides or not taking sides as they fancy themselves. So we're going to watch, I've selected 1-minute clips from Motherland. By the way, if I forget to announce it, someone asked me to do so. If you want to watch Motherland, it's available on Vimeo. You can rent it or you can purchase it. So we're going to watch the first 1-minute clip, which basically talks about genocides.
Reading about the Armenian Genocide, I knew what it meant to be hated for who you are and how autocratic nations can turn genocidal and attempt to exterminate their minorities. The Armenian Genocide was the first modern genocide, but sadly it wasn't the last. What followed was the Holocaust, then the Rwandan, Cambodian, Chilean, Darfur, and other genocides. As a journalist and an activist, I've pushed back against racism, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Black racism, anti-Semitism, mistreatment of migrants, sexism, the war on labor unions, and other forms of oppression and prosecution. But nothing I had experienced, witnessed, or even read had prepared me for what was unleashed on the Armenians of Artsakh, also known by its now outdated name, Nagorno-Karabakh, starting on September 27, 2020.
I want to do an unscientific poll because it's good for me to know the audience. I know that there are some of you that can write a book about the genocide. A lot of what I have to say is not new to you, and some may not be as familiar. So who here is sort of, you can write the book? You can raise your hand. Okay, quite a few. Who here, and there's a few over there. So then how about like the middle ground people who know enough? Okay, so that's probably the biggest group. And then who's got completely novice? Don't be shy. There's no judgment. We love you. We're happy that you're here. You know, I made my film for non-Armenians. I made this film for people who'd never heard of this. So it's good for me to know, because I wanted the presentation to really appeal to all types of groups. So some of it will be redundant for some of you. It's important for us to sometimes go back to basics and just say, well, what is genocide, right? I mean, what do we consider as genocide? And we always go back to the United Nations, right? So this is according to the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Article 2. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. That is basically what the United Nations considers genocide. Genocide doesn't have to include all of that to be genocide. It only has to include one, just FYI. So when Artsakh was, my mic isn't working? Hello? Okay, I can just go to the podium.
You can also use a handheld.
Okay. I'll just be at the podium. When Artsakh was invaded, like a lot of people, I was glued to what was called Twitter then, now it's X. I just couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Horrified up until 4 in the morning, seething with anger, watching the international community not do anything, reading and watching media, for the most part ignoring it or getting it wrong or just spewing Azerbaijani propaganda, lies, disinformation, etc. For me, it was pretty clear that what was happening was genocide. Azerbaijan had always wanted to ethnically cleanse Artsakh of its indigenous Armenians who'd lived there for millennia. And so after multiple things that, at that time, as I'm watching this, as I'm reporting about it, I launched an organization called the Truth and Accountability League, or TAAL, which is a nonprofit that has to do with fighting disinformation, propaganda, lies for the Armenians, Armenia, at the level of public policy, academia, press, etc. And so we got to work, and it was clear to me that what was happening was genocide. I didn't have any doubt about it, but others did. People were shy about using it, especially Armenians, because we Armenians are sometimes very coy. We did it with TAAL, we did a few things. We did the PSAs. I stand with Artsakh and Armenia. You saw Kim Kardashian and Cher in some of them. I was able to get 2 cities in Southern California, West Hollywood and Burbank, to recognize Artsakh, because we thought if we can get enough cities to recognize Artsakh, this will sort of be like a domino effect that could help, but it was happening too slow. So then I started with the film, and it came time for me to decide whether I was going to use the G word or not. And so I didn't want to make that decision just by myself. I started to call and correspond with some of the most famous and celebrated genocide scholars around the world and say, is this, what do you think? And I was very hard on them I acted as I don't believe that it's genocide, to really press them to see if they will push back. So I think the next clip we're going to watch, it's with Dr. Barloter Mkirtchian, who is the head of the Armenian Studies program at Cal State Fresno.
With the sort of genocidal intent that they orchestrated this attack, trying to ethnically cleanse Artsakh of Armenians and the cultural genocide and what's still happening, wondering if this, to you, seems like a genocidal act or genocide to begin with.
If you just, stack it up and look at the last 100 years since the genocide, you have to ask the question, why is Turkey so intent on attacking Armenia or working with Azerbaijan to attack Armenia or Karabakh? And then they don't stop even there, they keep demanding more. And the maximalist claim is that the president of Azerbaijan claims that, Armenia is a part of historic Azerbaijan, which is just ridiculous, but I can only think that for the government of Azerbaijan and Turkey, I don't see anything other than a goal of eliminating all Armenians from Armenia and Karabakh.
Wow, that's pretty clear. So would you essentially say this is genocide? This was just another attempt at a genocide?
I'd have to say it was.
So, examining genocides, we know so many that happened just in the 20th century. Of course, after the Armenian Genocide, there was the Holocaust, there was Cambodia, Rwanda, Chile, Darfur, and on and on. There have been many others, so I always like to examine it in context with other genocides and ethnic cleansings and such. In both cases of the Armenian Genocide and also Artsakh, there was a perfect storm that happened that benefited the perpetrators, right? For the Armenian Genocide, the Young Turks had been wanting to ethnically cleanse Eastern Anatolia of its indigenous Armenian population for a long time, and World War I gave them that opportunity, the chaos that was happening, and they did that. And in the case of the Artsakh genocide, it was, well, they calculated it, and I talk about it in the film, to do it right during a US presidential election when we're kind of distracted by politics. But then with COVID, it gave them an extra boost because it really further occupied people's minds of what was happening, and that's when they did it. It was something that Azerbaijan had been preparing for since the early 90s. We know that. And so it was a perfect storm when they did that. So I want to talk about a little bit about Armenian genocide recognition in the United States. Of course, in 2019, the House passed the Armenian Genocide Resolution Act almost unanimously. I think about, don't quote me, but 11 or 12 members abstained. And about a month later, the Senate passed it unanimously, very bipartisan. It was remarkable. We were excited. And then, of course, after 2020, in 2021, President Biden, after 106 years, became the first president to American president to officially recognize the Armenian Genocide. President Reagan had unofficially talked about it, but he kind of backtracked after pushback from the State Department due to Turkish lobby. We heard from our poet a lot of great information about the Armenian Genocide and sort of background and context. Just to sort of add a few more things. Toward the end of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire had lost a great deal of its occupied lands back to their original people. And their paranoia was that the Armenians were a threat also because a third of, some people are shy about saying it, but I'm not. A third of present-day Turkey, the eastern third, Anatolia, is historic Armenia. And they were afraid that Armenians too were going to sort of reclaim their lands. So they wanted to be proactive and get rid of the Armenians before that could ever happen. It's important to say that even though it's called the Armenian Genocide, they also massacred about 750,000 Assyrians, Yezdis, Kurdish people, I'll come to that, I know what you guys are thinking, Jews, and Greeks. With the Kurdish, a lot of Kurdish mercenaries were let out of prison so they could kill the Armenians, but then they would turn around and kill the Kurds. Armenian genocide, as it's classically known, sort of happened between 1915 and 1923. But it really started in the late 19th century with several massacres, like the Adana massacres. And then after 1923, Turkey started a very aggressive cultural genocide to erase Armenian presence from the lands, presence of millennia, our churches and cathedrals and other monuments, cemeteries, and whatnot. One of the things that, like, years of reading about the Armenian Genocide in context with other peoples and cultures is how multiple people, multiple Jewish individuals, not knowing that 20 years after the Armenian Genocide, the same fate was basically waiting for them. The Holocaust tried to stop it and bring attention to it. The first person was Henry Morgenthau, who was the American ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, who tried everything to get the Woodrow Wilson administration to intervene and stop the genocide. He was reporting all the time. Probably most of you have seen him depicted in several films, and the conversations that he had with Turkish officials who were pushing back against him. I'm going to read you something. It's from his memoirs, by the way. So Ambassador Morgenthau tried to prevent the deportations and killings, but the interior minister at the time, Talat Pasha, didn't care for his warnings, and he once asked him Why are you so interested in the Armenians anyway? You're a Jew. These people are Christians. The second person was Franz Werfel, who was a Jewish Austrian who wrote what's probably the most prominent book on the Armenian genocide, The 40 Days of Musadagh. Musadagh didn't last 40 days, but that's a biblical reference. So that was a book that he wrote, which several times was going to be a film, but again, Turkish lobby got the State Department to stop the production of it. And then the last one was, Raphael Lemkin, who right after the Holocaust coined the term genocide, partly after having learned about the Armenian genocide. That's the reason we have this word, and internationally it's recognized and followed sometimes. There are 34 nations that recognize the Armenian genocide officially. I'm not going to read most of them, but I'm just going to give you the impressive ones. Switzerland, right? The neutral nation, although, believe me, Switzerland is not neutral in anything. But the fact that they have recognized it, I think is remarkable. Russia, a nation that's sort of proven itself to not be an ally of Armenians, is one of the 34 nations. Of course, Turkey to this day denies it and has a very aggressive denial campaign. And I'll tell you why Turkey, some of the reasons why Turkey will not recognize the genocide. First of all, it would completely contradict their myth of how the modern-day Turkey was founded. After the end of the Ottoman Empire, when Ataturk came to power, what it would mean was that they would have to admit that their founding fathers were mass murderers. So it's a problem. It's just not going to work for them. Denial of the Armenian genocide also affects Turkey's domestic policies. They teach it in school. They brainwash the kids to deny the Armenian genocide. And also, talking about the genocide is insulting Turkishness, which is a crime in Turkey. Also, if they were to recognize the Armenian genocide, they're going to have a bigger problem with their Kurdish population. About 30 million Kurdish live in Turkey and in oppression, and that would become an issue because Kurdish people have been going through similar things that Armenians went through for so many years. And then, of course, there's the reparations and properties and wealth and insurance that so many Armenians, their survivors, descendants, would go after, right? I mean, there were so many affluent, educated, accomplished Armenians that were killed or they had to flee Turkey around 1915. So the next one is from Dr. Khachik Muradian, who teaches at Columbia University and also works for the Library of Congress, whom I interviewed for Motherland.
Policy of erasure of Armenian culture, heritage itself, is part of the ongoing culture of genocide.
Yeah, cultural genocide is, along with genocide denial, are the last acts of a genocide. So now we're going to talk about Artsakh, or also known as Nagorno-Karabakh, which was a name that was imposed on Artsakh by the Soviets. It's half Turkic, half Russian. I don't use it. I even ding Armenian writers who use it because it's just not valid. Some of the most frustrating things for me reading any kind of editorial or commentary from other journalists, whether it's BBC, Guardian, whatnot, is that they don't do the basic homework. And sometimes even Armenians don't know this, and it's okay. If you don't take anything away tonight from this, just take this one thing. Artsakh was never part of a sovereign Azerbaijan. Never. Azerbaijan was created by the Soviets in 1918 as a territory to gather nomadic people. 2 years later, it folded into the Soviet Union under Soviet law. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Artsakh declared its independence from the Soviet Union prior to not only Azerbaijan, but Armenia. Therefore, Azerbaijan's claim that this is secession, that this is any of the terms that they use is absurd. Artsakh was never part of an independent Azerbaijan. It was put under Azerbaijan's control by Stalin because Stalin wanted to create conflicts between different ethnicities living within Soviet Union so that they would never sort of group up and go against Moscow. And he did that intentionally, but also under pressure from oil-rich Azerbaijan and Turkey, and put it under Azerbaijan's control. And for 70 years, Armenians of Artsakh lived under oppression, discrimination, slaughter. And then, of course, in 1988, when Armenians of Artsakh first started talking about declaring their independence, they went into full gear and carried out the pogroms of '88 and killed, massacred 30,000 Armenians. And in 1990 declared war on Artsakh that lasted until '94, ending in a ceasefire brokered by France, US, and Russia. Even I watching anything related to Artsakh, it's difficult for me because I've sort of spent so many, just so much time getting to know it, the people, interviewing survivors, veterans, people who fled, refugees. And there are few people that really get it that are non-Armenian. One of them is Senator Bob Menendez, whom I interviewed for the film, and we're going to watch a clip from him.
Armenia doesn't have the same air force powers, it doesn't have the same military powers as those that are involved in the region. And between
By the way, I have to give you kudos, New Jersey Armenians. You would think that the California Armenians would do it. You've managed, if there are 3 members of Congress who have fought the hardest for the Armenians, 2 of them are from New Jersey, Senator Menendez and Congressman Frank Pallone. So give yourself a hand because, and those are just 2 of the prominent members of Congress. I've met other New Jersey folks. State Senator Anthony Portantino in California is also from New Jersey. He is Italian, New Jersey, and he's a huge ally, so I'm really impressed by that, and I just love that what Senator Menendez has done, Congressman Frank Pallone, Congressman Schiff, Brad Sherman, and on and on. Just a quick, just want to give you I was telling someone outside that it wasn't a miracle. It was extraordinary that Armenians were able to withstand 44 days of terror in 2020 when Azerbaijan, with help from Turkey, Russia, and Israel, invaded Artsakh and started massacring Armenians because Armenians were outnumbered 10-1. Their military equipment was like from the 90s, and Azerbaijan had the most sophisticated military and all kinds of things that were just game changers. And they also, what they did was, and Erdogan, the president of Turkey, did this himself. They hired mercenaries from Pakistan, Libya, and Syria. They paid them $2,000 a month to kill Armenians, and $100 bonuses for every Armenian beheaded alive. We have them we have this on tape. There are interviews with a few of them that were captured. Who talk about it, that this is what they were paid to do. I mean, this is a barbaric thing that you read about from like the Middle Ages, but this happened in 2020. That they were beheading people, elderly, they were beheading disabled people. They captured a village, and if the villagers hadn't fled, anyone that was left behind, kids, elderly, disabled, it didn't matter, they would just kill them. When we were putting Motherland together, I had sort of gotten to know several guerrilla journalists, some of them anonymous, that we got footage from, verified footage. We had 43 hours of footage just to cut. And I can't even tell you the stuff that we had to watch, my editor and I had to watch and decide what's going to go in and what's not. It's just unfathomable that this happened only 4 years ago. As I was saying earlier, Azerbaijan spent 27 years getting ready for this in every possible way, with military, with industrial output, with diplomacy. Some of you have probably heard Azerbaijan laundromat. It was something that broke from OCCRP and Transparency International that exposed Azerbaijan's 2.9 billion euros operation of bribing world politicians, most of them in Europe, policymakers, dignitaries, something that caused 14 members of Council of Europe to be dismissed. There were a lot more than that. Those 14 They had like solid evidence on them. So what Aliyev did was spend 27 years brainwashing the world and making Armenia seem like the aggressor with just lies and distortions. And he went around and created these strategic partnerships with media companies like BBC, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, right? They spend millions with them, but then of course they have influence over content and editorial. Same thing with universities. Oxford University is one that really stands out. It's the kind of propaganda that fed to Oxford, and they eat it up because it's, hey, it's good business for them. So we're gonna watch a clip about Armenophobia and how they dehumanize Armenians so that they can get their people to kill Armenians and not even think about it.
Systematically teaching Azerbaijani children hatred of Armenians, nurse-feeding state-sponsored Armenophobia, and promotion of violence against all Armenians has been a national obsession under the two Aliyevs.
Aliyev essentially succeeded in spreading hate and creating that dehumanizing image of Armenians. And that policy of saving face domestically also, unfortunately, allowed him to hold on to power. If you look, the wealthiest country in the South Caucasus is Azerbaijan. Just look at the hydrocarbon resources of that country. But data shows that the poorest nation per capita in this region is actually Azerbaijanis.
And this practice is very, it's ongoing and it's extremely aggressive. I talked about the Azerbaijan laundromat. There were also the Panama Papers that were released and showed all kinds of dirty schemes that Azerbaijan pulls throughout the world. Most of it based out of UK. That's like their central office. The press trips, they have these propaganda press trips. They invite members of the press to come to Baku on these 5-star, 5-diamond trips and wine and dine them and then feed them lies and garbage and then tell them to go home and start writing about it. Oh, by the way, prior to the invasion of Artsakh, they hired seven of the leading lobbyists in Washington, D.C. to sort of get prepared for what they were about to unleash. Some of them have since distanced themselves from Azerbaijan, but damn, it's been done. One of the other people that really gets Artsakh, I call her Armenians' godmother. I absolutely love her. I've been trying to get the Armenian government to honor her for what she's done. It hasn't happened yet. It's Baroness Cox, who has gone to Artsakh and Armenia for over 65 times since the early 90s. You know, I was in Armenia. I go to Armenia a lot. I just got back a week ago. About a year and a half ago, I was there. She went from Yerevan to Mary, just southern Armenia. That's a road I don't even want to go on because it's so tiring and windy. And at 87 or 88 years old, she goes down there because that's her commitment. So here's a clip for Baroness Cox.
fine. No country has an interest, other countries only interests. We have oil interest, Azerbaijan for money. And I said, I'm ashamed of you.
Yes, she is one of the most revered members of the British House of Lords, but you know, she's a minority. Most of UK oil interest, right? I mean, BP is a huge partner with SOCAR, Azerbaijan's national oil, and self-interest. So Baroness Cox herself can't move mountains. No one can. You know, it's politically incorrect to do this, but my online publication is called The Blunt Post because I try not to be fear-driven and not to filter myself. I'm glad that the world reacted to Ukraine the way they did, but part of it bothered me, and that part was, how was it that in less than 24 hours we were so clear who the aggressor and who the victim was, but yet Armenians, we were going around telling the facts and the stories and showing evidence and everything else that we could, and yet we couldn't get the same reaction from the press. Both-sidism like really irritates me, or false balance it's called sometimes, which is sort of, you know, this is my own thing. I always say, if you're a cop and you show up to a couple's house where the husband is a wife beater and the woman is bloodied and bruised and such, you don't sit them both down and say, I want both of you to put your fists down. You know who the victim is. So why is there both-sidism when it comes to Artsakh? Congressman Schiff talks about it in this clip.
For years, Azerbaijan provoked violence along the line of contact, and many of us in Congress, through successive administrations, urged our State Department to forcefully push back, call out Azerbaijan for its belligerence and its provocative acts. And the most that we could get was statements of moral equivalence. We call on both sides to cease any further violence. We call on both sides to peacefully resolve the differences. When you do that, when you're not willing to hold one side accountable that's responsible, it's essentially green-lighting further aggression.
Just once again, I want to talk about Truth and Accountability League because I rarely talk about it, and people tell me to talk about it, or TAAL. What we do is we monitor everything that happens pertaining to Armenia, Armenians, whether it's policymakers or media or institutions like museums, universities, stuff that they get wrong, and we address them. We addressed the Metropolitan Museum when they changed Eisenovsky's ethnicity from Russian to Ukrainian. We got them to change it. We confronted the London Transit Authority when Azerbaijan bought advertising space there and used Dadivank as a backdrop and claimed that it was Azerbaijani. We got them pulled. We confronted a very Armenophobic mayor of Irvine, California, for some of the things that she said, which resulted in the city of Irvine inviting us to screen Motherland, which then, after that, they approved the plan to erect an Armenian Genocide memorial in Irvine, which actually 2 days ago was the groundbreaking of it. So Truth and Accountability League, or TAAL, I always tell people, It's for us what ADL is for the Jewish community or NAACP is for the African American community. We have to be fighting this, not just on the ground, but the information war, because the other side is super, super aggressive. I'm coming to an end in my presentation. So, real quickly, what's Azerbaijan's end game, right? Or Turkey's? What these two nations want, well, ultimately, their blue sky wish is just Armenia not to exist. But, well, logically, what they want is to occupy all of southern Armenia, called Sunik, that region, so that they can connect Azerbaijan with Turkey, including Nakhichevan, which is ancient Armenia, and that's that. And that will cut off Armenia from its only trading partner. That's what they're trying to provoke. They're actively trying to provoke Armenia into a war because that's what they want, because they will win. There are 80 million plus Turkish, 10 million plus Azerbaijani. Armenia has a population of about, depending on who you ask, between 2.7 or 2.9 million people. And I won't even go into the imbalance of military power there. And by the way, there's so many other players in all of this. Britain, UK comes in again. UK, aside from their oil interests, they always had their eye on all the minerals that are in Artsakh. There is the Anglo Mining Company, which is partly owned by Aliyev's daughter. It's a British-based company. They just cut a $40-something million deal so that they can start mining for that. So there's a lot going on than what's just on the surface. Last things I want to say before I'll take a few questions, if you have them, is we cannot forget Artsakh. Okay, we cannot think that it's gone. We have to fight for Artsakh. It's always been part of Armenia. By law, we're in the right, but we have to push. We just have to fight for that. I don't know if you know about the Center for Truth and Justice. It's a brilliant organization. It was founded by Judge Agassia Apkarian in LA. They are an army of attorneys in LA. They were based in Artsakh too, now in Armenia. For the last almost 4 years, they've been documenting, interviewing Artsakh refugees and survivors, and they have a case now that they're going to present to International Court of Justice about Artsakh and that it was a genocide. So the Center for Truth and Justice is one of my favorite organizations that's doing incredible work, and none of these lawyers are paid for it. And we're gonna, before I take some questions, we're gonna watch one more clip. Someone was asking me, I think it was Dr. Antonian was asking me, aren't you afraid? Because the next documentary I want to do is, well, I won't tell you what it is because who knows who's going to watch this online. But I was telling her that an Azerbaijani dissident who now lives in hiding told me about a year ago that he's in touch with one of Aliyev's friends or his inner circles, and he told him that I was on their top enemies of the state list, which I kind of am honored. No, I'm not afraid. I mean, I don't have a death wish, But guess what? If we're all afraid, nothing ever gets done. So this last clip you're going to watch is just about just threats, and then after that, if you have questions, I will take them.
As a journalist who is also an activist, I've received my share of hate messages and threats of violence, but none have been as vile and threatening as those from various Azerbaijani and Turkish people. One threatened me on Twitter with a direct message that read, "We know your position and place. Consider your own security." Sometimes people notify me when they see that a call to action has been made against me, while others would simply spew hatred. Then there was this one Azerbaijani who tweeted my information and wrote, "Dove is a radio host from the USA. Rare asshole." In Azerbaijan, dove is a derogatory word for gay men, such as faggot. This wasn't the first time I'd been called a homophobic slur, and it certainly won't be the last. But I've never been called a rare asshole or a dove. What an honor.
Yes, a rare asshole. Sorry about that. Thank you, Dr. Quinlan. Thank you, Dr. Antonian, for having me. Thank you all for being here at the university. Mr. President, I don't see any one of you, but I want to thank you as well for having me. I appreciate it. Dr. Quinlan, do we have time for a few questions? There you are. Any questions from the audience? No? Oh. This lady right here. Hi. Make you feel good? I'm going to. I'm so glad you asked that. Now, it's hard for me because I don't want to betray the theme of tonight. I don't want to be cheery, but just got back from Armenia. Armenia's GDP was record last year. Armenia broke all tourism records last year. 2.1 million tourists. About 90,000 Russians and Ukrainians have moved to Armenia, which is really good for the economy. It is a regional tech powerhouse, okay? And of course, we just started very, very preliminary talk of EU membership. So I'll say that. There's a lot of great stuff happening. The Armenians, this isn't 1915 in some ways, right? We are all over the world, from Uruguay to Argentina, Brazil, Iran, Syria. We're everywhere, and we're more educated, and we're more accomplished. We can do this. I hope that made you feel better. There was a hand, that lady right there. Good question, a very complicated one. I'll have to make it short. Armenian government has a gun to its head. Because of Armenia not having any natural resources, but at the same time, the Western world being so dependent on Azerbaijani oil and gas, especially Europe. At the same time, Russia laundering its oil through Azerbaijan, Turkey being in NATO, Turkey constantly threatening to release the 2.6 million Syrians into Europe if Europe doesn't behave, as well as the ISIS and Grey Wolves that they have cells all through Europe, as well as interests by Israel to be in southern Armenia so they can monitor Iran and strike if necessary, as well as British interests. Armenia is like, I always say, Armenia is in this chess game, but they're not allowed to play. Everyone is playing around them. It's a very delicate dangerous territory, and they're trying their best not to provoke a war, because that's exactly what Azerbaijan wants. Azerbaijan and Turkey are literally waiting for a cough to attack Armenia. And it's just like it's walking around landmines, basically. And I think for the most part, they've done a good job so far. Yeah. There was a question there.
Yeah, two questions. Has
Sure.
this movie been in the theaters? Any of your movies been in the theaters? And also, have you done any work with Alex Gibney?
I'm sorry, the first one, I think you talked about the film being in theaters, correct?
And well, the second question, have you done any work with Alex Gibney, who's a leading documentarian?
No. The answer to the second question is no. The answer to the first question is we were not able to find a distributor. We spent a long time going after, from the top studios to the streamers to the medium and small distribution companies, but for various reasons, some of them obvious, people shied away from distributing this. So we decided to self-distribute on Vimeo. Yeah. I don't think I heard that, what you said. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, after 106 years, well, now 109 years, Armenian genocide is finally not a taboo subject for the most part. So now Hollywood is slowly touching it, right? Like you can watch it on PBS and such. But when it comes to Artsakh, they're like, oh no. You know, we had a lot of screenings. We premiered the film in LA, then I premiered it in Armenia, premiered it in Toronto. But I had a couple of big institutions that were gonna screen it. They backed away when they watched the actual film. Because I don't shy away. In the film, the 2-hour version that you see, I go after everybody. I mean, I expose Council of Europe, European Union. I go after Republicans and I go after Democrats. I go after the UK Parliament. We talk about the Azerbaijan laundromat, the Panama Papers, you name it. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that. Right here. True. I don't think anyone can really say that. Remember that the Artsakh invasion happened before President Biden recognized it, but after Congress recognized it. I think for the most part, Azerbaijan wanting to invade Artsakh was way planned ahead. It wasn't, I don't think it was triggered by the US recognition in Congress. Yeah. There's a lady right here. Good question. So they're great trading partners. A lot of Armenia's enemies want to slander, I don't know if that's the right word, Armenia by saying, oh, you're partners with Iran, you back Iran, blah, 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 blah. It's not true. Armenia's relationship with Iran is out of necessity. With the borders of Armenia close to Azerbaijan and Turkey, it's the only trading route. So Armenia imports a lot from Iran, and Iran goes through Armenia to Georgia, to Europe. So that's their relationship. It's self-interest for both parties. But I always remind people, when Artsakh was invaded, Iran's foreign minister congratulated Azerbaijan. And also, when Putin last year was talking about building this highway that would go alongside Armenia to Russia, to the Black Sea, that would allow cargo from Iran, but also from China and India to go through, all of a sudden, Iran was like, yeah, let's get on that train. So it's all about self-interest for Iran, right? They're not some like big ally or anything like that. Are we done? Thank you so much.
So thank you, Vic, not just for your extraordinary presentation tonight, but if you have not yet done so, I cannot urge everyone here strongly enough to make sure you see Motherland. It is just absolutely magnetic and just fascinating film. Our closing remarks tonight will be delivered by Marjorie Feinstein. Marjorie is the founding chair of the St. Elizabeth University Communications Department Emeritus, and she's also the chair of the Holocaust and Genocide Education Center's Advisory Board. She plays an essential role in everything the center does to ensure that the memory of those so tragically murdered in genocide are never forgotten. Marjorie.
First of all, I would like to give special gratitude to Vic Gerami. Thank you so much for enlightening us with everything that you shared with us this evening. A very special thank you to Richard Quinlan, because we wouldn't be here tonight without his leadership. And every year, our programs are graced with Deb Garish's poetry, and I know that all of us are so grateful for the leadership of Dr. Gary Crosby, who has been so supportive. We have with us several advisory board members, including Reverend Jeff Marquet, Yolanda Kunz, and Rebecca Fields, and pardon me if I'm forgetting anybody else, who keep our center running and support Richard's work in every way. We are indeed very fortunate to be housed in our center at St. Elizabeth's University. Just want to share a few closing remarks that we need to continue to inspire and educate in programs such as these, using the lessons that we are learning that Vic Gerami shared with us tonight to recognize and absolutely oppose hatred and bigotry, to monitor the words we use, the words we choose, and the ways we use rhetoric, and to encourage not only, and I don't like the word tolerance, because that means we're tolerating. I ask you to think about acceptance and respect. We all know that fable about a man walking on the beach covered with starfish, and he picks up a few and casts one back into the sea, and he doesn't get to all of them, but his efforts make a huge difference on each one that he saves. We must be mindful of the intrinsic dignity of every human being, as now more than ever, all you have to do is turn on the TV tonight to realize that never again has become now. We must find the time to carve out our own personal commitments to ensure that the flames of righteous indignation will burn as long as we commit to understanding that the past truly informs the present. And as Vic mentioned, and as he alluded to, Hitler got the idea about the final solution as he passed on all of his learning of what tragically happened in the Armenian Genocide. Education is the only answer, and that we see it from partnerships such as these as we commemorate the Armenian Genocide this evening. It becomes a strong respondent to actualizing change, especially for those who are young. I was pleased to hear, Vic, that you referenced Elie Wiesel, because his words resound to me every single day, that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. My fervent hope is that we can walk away tonight from programs such as these and create our own forms of relevancy by looking at someone differently and working to understand that we are all connected and that we must be willing to open our hearts to be more compassionate at all cost. And yes, each and every one of you this evening can become rescuers in your own rights and in your own individual actions. But I've learned this. Guess what? Even that is not enough. We need to go beyond and educate with each of us saying, "Here I am." And in saying that, we have to realize that here you all are, that you will never allow our world to descend into the darkness that we are seeing this very moment in our lives. As it is up to us, each and every one of us, to not be silent and work together towards finding the light in our universe. Having just came home a couple of months ago from Israel, I invite and challenge you to share in the work of our Center for Holocaust and Genocide Education at St. Elizabeth. Please don't be strangers to us. We open our doors to all of you. I ask for your connections to provide the memory of those who cannot speak, as we learned tonight, for the descendants, so many of you are here tonight, of the Armenian Genocide. For to forget them is to let them perish once again. We're living in a time, my friends, where hate speech is being accepted as free speech, and that endangers us all. On a bright note, I want to thank you for joining in our being together tonight and making your differences simply by being here. Because as we generationally move further from the Armenian Genocide and the other genocides that we know so much about, we need to understand that we have to create more learning opportunities to simply preserve the humankind that we live in. I urge you to remember that the survival of memory lies in each of our hands.
Thank you so much. Beautiful and brilliant as always, Marjorie. Greatly appreciated. Our concluding prayer tonight will be delivered by Father Arshan Avazian. As he approaches the stage, I would just like to take a moment to not only thank all of you for being here this evening, but ask at some point tonight that you look at the back of your program and see the names of the people who were thanked. Because a program such as this never comes together without extensive cooperation and collaboration among all divisions. And what I've learned in my 2 years here at SCU is that there is absolutely no shortage of people who are encouraging helpful, and always willing to jump in at any moment to make events and nights such as this occur. And so I thank all of you, and with that, Father Vazian.
Heavenly Father, God of all creation, once again we are gathered to remember the victims of the Armenian Genocide. And even now, more than a century later, the wound is still open in our hearts. We're still hurt not only because the truth and justice are denied, but also because we affirm our commitment at every opportunity and commit ourselves to never again. And yet, it keeps happening again and again all around us. Nation against nation, community against community, culture against culture, race against race, neighbor against neighbor. How long, O Lord, shall we wait until you inspire us and empower us to rise up and embrace peace instead of war, tolerance instead of intolerance, appreciation instead of condemnation, love instead of hatred? Lord, open our hearts and eyes to one another so that when we look at each other, we will see your face and appreciate and rejoice in our differences. As a Christian, I offer this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, and I affirm my faith in the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Our Muslim brothers and sisters address you as Allah. Our Jewish brothers and sisters recognize you as Yahweh, and still others address you in other names. Make us realize that under any name, you are our God, and we are all your children, brothers and sisters to one another. Lord, empower us to do what is right and bring peace and harmony in our own day. Amen.
That brings tonight's program to a close. As we depart, I would just like to thank you again. Your presence, your attention, your commitment to this topic is so important and touches me deeply. Thank you all. Go off tonight and spread messages of education and compassion, and thank you again.